Motherhood is where it all begins. It is our literal origin story, and as a therapist, I knew we could do a better job supporting new moms. Come with me on this journey as we build the digital village, one family at a time. Disordered eating, pregnancy, and postpartum is a taboo subject that is far more common than we have been led to believe. Today I talk with Jenny, who's a therapist expert and a mom who shares her personal and professional experience and tips for how to deal with this very important issue. I hope you enjoy and find it as informative as I did. Well, welcome, Jenny. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so thankful you agreed to be here. I know recording a podcast is like no small thing, so thank you.
No problem. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And so, I'll just start out by saying that although obviously I love working in pregnancy and postpartum mental health, the way that intersects with eating disorders, our topic today, is really kind of new to me. And so I'm actually very excited to hear, because I know this is something that you have spent a lot of time learning about and gaining expertise in. And so, I'm curious, because to me, it seems like such a really niche sort of specialty. Tell me about your process of deciding that this was a place you wanted to put your energy and focus and love and attention.
Yeah, that's a great question, because with all honesty, it's a mark of vulnerability in your growth as not only a human, but as a therapist, right? Because me being a marriage and family therapist and finding my niche, that kind of pulled me into that next stage of life where going through, if I can reflect on a more personal note, and that being where I on myself gone through an eating disorder. And by the way, when I talk about this eating disorder, I'll just tend to be vague, because I don't want to trigger or get anybody to a place where they can't handle. And I know that whoever's listening can definitely take time and pause if they need to stop and know that this might be a little triggering. Just take care of yourself.
Yeah,
So
I love that you're starting there. Thank you for that reminder, because like you're saying, sometimes people sharing details can be triggering for people. They need to be really intentional about how and when they expose themselves to other people's stories and that sort of thing. So thank you for looking out for anybody who might be listening, who might be concerned about this. So for you, this came from a place of your own personal experiences.
Oh yeah. This was my own specific trauma that I went through, and this was a way that I managed it, is with the eating disorder. So with that eating disorder, it was like my guardian. It was my protector. It kept me safe. It kept me without judgment, because when I was going through the trauma, it was what kept me safe, right? Keep small. And that's what this eating disorder was for me, is small. And I didn't want to create glitches or disconnection with anybody. And I think as I reflect more, and personally have gone through my own eating disorder clinics, I've gone to see doctors, registered dietitians. I've gone through the process of growing through this and then seeing the growth on the recovery side. And yes, recovery is possible. Yes, going through an eating disorder personally, not only for myself, but also seeing my clients go through recovery and being fully recovered and knowing that is possible. But the idea around my story is that helped me as I was through my disordered eating. And that's another topic I'll come back to, is the difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder. So what I love about this is that being an athlete, I was expected to look a certain way, talk a certain way, do certain things. And there's that pressure, right? Where with the eating disorder, you have, and this is where I did a lot of shaming, because that's what happens when you're going through eating disorders. You go through a lot of shame, and you go through a lot of disconnection, where you feel like I have expectations. I'm wanting to be a personal, it basically perfectionism. And I knew that when I went through that perfectionism, is I couldn't identify where it was coming from until actually someone brought it up to me. And they said, hey, I noticed that you are looking at a point where you might need some help. And I'm like, I don't need help. And the beauty of that is I had a lot of great people around me that wanted me to succeed in my sport. And because of that, I was able to go get help, right? And that is,
Mm,
I think, the initial reason why you come in for an eating disorder is because someone has come to you, or and not everyone, but initially people come to you and say, I have a concern. Are you
mhm,
okay? They're noticing things as simple as, hey, I am losing weight and I'm not staying at a stable weight. I'm, dare I say, I wasn't having a consistent period, right?
mm,
And
mhm.
on top of that, I wasn't eating when everybody was eating. I was fearing gaining weight. There was these are kind of
There were a lot
the
of signs for people to see around you.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you feel like that's a pretty typical journey for a person, that their eating disorder is most often brought to light by like a concerned loved one versus
Yeah.
them saying that they need help on their own?
Oh, I if I could percentage wise, normally it's about 10% that come saying I need help, and then that
Yeah,
90% are like, nope,
somebody else said.
I'm
So let's talk to because that means that there's probably people listening right now to what we're saying who love somebody that they think has an eating disorder
mm,
and maybe
mhm.
have even brought it up and have gotten that response of like, I'm fine, I'm
Yeah,
okay, right?
well
Which you
said.
said was your first response. But you
Yes.
did ultimately go on to get help and to get healed, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but to heal and to recover.
Mhm.
So to that person who's listening right now, that's like, I'm worried about somebody I care about, and I've tried to bring it up, or I'm afraid to bring it up because their response is going to be, I'm fine, maybe angry, maybe defensive, right? Like
Yeah.
tell them for a moment, like what your thoughts are about that, having
Well,
been on the other side of it. Like, what do you wish the people in your life could have heard you say back then?
no, I know it's a very, very shameful place you're at, and I know it's
Mm,
very hard to speak to because you feel terrible. You really do. You don't want to tell anybody what you've done to survive in this. You don't feel comfortable knowing how to be even open about it because you've done so many things to create barriers. And I would say that to the person who's coming, right? So there's been the barriers and those expectations of how to protect yourself. And because of the trauma, potentially, and because of, let's be honest, our society expects
mm,
us to be a certain way, look a certain way. And that
mhm,
is based around where I know I'm supposed to look a certain way, right? I should be privileged to be a thin woman, white, Caucasian, all of these expectations. And when someone comes to me and says, wait, I'm struggling, I'm not okay. I don't think so, right? So that is the first shield. But what ends up happening is if someone feels like, right, they come to you and they say, hey, I feel like you might need some help, is coming with grace and love
mm,
towards them. And that grace is, i'm I hear where you're at, I see where you're at, I see your struggle, but I want you to know this is coming from love, this is coming from
mhm,
a warm place, and
mhm,
it's never coming from, let me take you to the doctors right now. It's,
mm.
let's sit here and talk about where you're at. Where have you been struggling? How can I
So
support you?
probably I think you said some really important things I want to highlight. What I'm hearing is that for the person with an eating disorder, there's this shield that they create
Mm,
of immediate denial because it feels like something's being challenged that actually they may be using to cope.
well said.
And so to have somebody call that out and say, I want to take that away from you. I think it's a problem. I don't think you should have it. There's just this immediate protectiveness that's going to happen. That's not
Mm,
personal. It's not,
mm-mm,
it doesn't say anything about the quality of your relationship with that person. It doesn't say anything about their trust in you. It's just entirely about the shield that's built up to hold on to. In my mind, I get this like security blanket picture, like to hold
mm,
on to this eating
yeah,
disorder that is like helping them cope
yeah.
somehow. It's helping them get through somehow. And
Mhm,
so you're trying to tell me it needs to go away. And I'm going to say, nuh-uh, no, it
mhm.
doesn't. You can't have it. No matter how much I love
Mm,
you, you can't have it,
yes,
right?
yes.
And what I also hear you say that I think is worth highlighting is like that the person who loves someone with an eating disorder that is brave, being brave and saying, I'm
Mhm,
concerned about you. It's so
mhm.
important to not get pulled into a fight in that moment. It's so
Yes.
important to not get pulled into the tug of war of like,
Yes.
yes, it is. Yes, it is a problem. Look, it's a problem. Because
Mm,
it sounds like that's just going to be more of like the self-protectiveness, but that your, recommendation is that it's more of a soft invitation, like, I'm not even going to get pulled into whether it is or isn't. I'm just going to
Yeah.
say, I see you and I'm
Yeah.
here. And that invitation stays open,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's important.
Well, and also to hold space for where they're at, for you just introducing the idea. Hey,
Mhm.
I see that we can't eat together right now. And I see like your clothes are getting loose and that things aren't looking so like that your body isn't functioning and you're always cold. And there's always these things that I'm seeing that are lining up. And if they start protecting themselves at that moment, that's when, like you said, you could just hold space and say, I know this is a lot. I got you.
Mhm.
I'm here for
Mhm.
you. If you want to
Mhm.
stop, we can talk about this later. We can be there for each other later. And guess what?
Mhm.
That's okay. But
Yeah.
I'm here for you. And
Yeah.
also, there is sometimes what I can be helpful is also NEDA, it's National Eating Disorder Association, and
Okay.
there's ways that you can go on to the website, and I've clicked a link for you to go into the connection with that, and you can actually take a quiz, right? You can
Okay.
actually break down a quiz, and someone will go in there and say, hey, is this an eating disorder? And you can actually go ahead and do that with the actual person who's struggling and say, hey, what do you think about just asking some answers of questions?
Like,
Or
yeah, like, let's consult this objective other thing instead of
yeah,
getting into, yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No. Like, let's just go, like, look
yeah,
someplace else and see what the experts say about it. And yeah,
yes, because
everything
let's
you're like showing as an example is like sort of this light offering. It's like, I
yes.
love you. I care about you. And I think it's important to see because although I don't know a lot about eating disorders, I have had plenty of experience with clients over the years, like needing to confront something they're worried about in a loved one. And I
Mhm,
think when you go into that, it's easy because often you've been thinking it for a long time. You've been worried for a long time and it's been like
mhm,
in the back of your mind. And when you finally decide you're going to say it, it comes with all of this like, in this moment, we're going to resolve it. In this moment, we're going to confront it. In this moment, we're going to come up with a solution. And like, that's not a realistic
no,
expectation
no,
because of this shielding that is
yeah,
really common with something like an eating disorder.
yeah, and coming again with an open hand, open mind policy, like, "Hey, I'm here to hold your hand through this, and we could talk about this later, but know that I'm gonna come back and I wanna be there for you again," right? Even if you have
Yeah.
to, right? And
So I
that
love this
is
tool. I'm going to make sure to link it. I
yeah,
think this tool is going to be really good and helpful for people who are like maybe listening to you talk and they're like, is this me? Is this something that I should be concerned about? You know, it gives them an objective thing to go look
oh,
at
yeah.
and resources to connect with. So to go back to what you said earlier, what is the difference between an eating disorder and disordered eating?
Beautiful question again.
Because I've
The
never heard that before, so I want to know.
So an eating disorder is a diagnosable behavior, right? You come
Okay.
in and that's diagnosed like bulimia, anorexia,
Okay.
orthorexia. All of those are diagnosable. You go to a therapist, they say, hey, an eating disorder specialist says, hey, you have all these qualifications. Yes, you have a like eating disorder, right?
Hmm.
However, now think of it as a pendulum, right?
Okay.
So you have this pendulum on the one, like the left side, and that's an eating disorder that's diagnosable. And then on the other hand, you have the right side where that's the extreme other version where this is someone who has like what we call our Hayes model, wealth, health at every size, where we just eat when we're hungry, we drink when we're hungry, we get intuition, we hear our body, we're in tune with our body, kind of those two extremes, right? So
Right.
now something in the middle would be more of disordered eating, right? You're calling it a behavior, right? I'm noticing a behavior in the middle that's creeping closer to that disordered eating
Got it. So it's sort of
diagnosis.
like disordered eating is less severe. It's kind of headed in the direction of a
Yep.
diagnosis. It's
Yep.
concerning. Maybe it's causing
Mhm.
problems or it's destructive in some way, but it's
Mhm.
not fully diagnosable.
Correct. So imagine it would be dieting all the time. You're
Mhm.
noticing that. Compulsive eating. You're noticing food preoccupation. But again, it's not to an extent where you're noticing all the other diagnosable symptoms. So those are just
Mhm.
examples of what.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
That's so helpful. Thank you. That I can imagine that sort of spectrum. And you know what I find myself curious about in terms of our conversation is what is this interplay of like pregnancy and postpartum and disordered eating? Like, what's the impact? Talk to me about, what you see happen for your clients when they are pregnant or postpartum and
Well,
struggling with this.
first of all, I can only imagine what place they're in when they're trying to struggle with going through a pregnancy, their body changing. That's a lot. It is so
Mhm.
much being pregnant and knowing I have to hold this child and make a baby, but also know everything is getting shifted and changed and you have no choice, right? I mean, you had
Mhm.
a choice, but the identity around it is my body used to look like this and now it's changing. And how
Mhm.
do I embrace that? First of all, is the expectation around knowing that you have, again, your tribe. I call it your tribe, the people who support you, right?
Yeah.
So your OBGYN, the person who is sitting there in the office with you, right? That person who, when you're deciding to get pregnant, right?
Mhm.
Knowing that they are in a healthy understanding of your body, first of all. And
Mhm.
if you do have an eating disorder, speak to that for your OB
Mm.
and ask them, hey, I really can't look at my weight when I go into the doctor's office.
Mm.
It's triggering. Talking to their triggers. So actually talking to their OB and saying, "Hey, these are things that I struggle with." And actually, I know again, this they're a professional and guess what? They don't have to tell you your file is closed. It's private. It's your privilege, right?
Yes,
So if you
right.
think
Mhm.
about you have that safety.
It's
So if
safe to talk
anything,
about it and to tell them. Yeah.
yes. So
And I
that's
love that's such a good tip. So I want to highlight that. So if you're somebody who has a history with disordered eating at all and you're going into pregnancy, just so you know, one of the things that's really common after about 13 weeks of pregnancy is to be weighed at every appointment, every time you walk in the
mhm,
door. And
mhm,
towards the end of pregnancy, you can be coming in the door once a week or more. And so
mhm.
it's not uncommon to be being weighed every single time. And
Yes.
that, if that's a trigger for you, is something that you can talk about with your care team and say, I prefer not to be weighed at all, or I'd prefer to not be
Mhm,
told my weight, or I'd
mhm,
prefer to be weighed less
mhm.
frequently, or whatever it is that you need. But that's a conversation that you can have. And one of the things that's hard about that is often the person weighing you is not your provider. It's often office staff who maybe didn't get the memo, what you
Yes,
requested, and they're just doing what they
yes.
always do. So then it becomes something you have to say every time. And that is
Mhm.
something that it'd be great to have a support person on your side to have really transparent conversations with your care team and to be prepared for so that you're not going in like, wait, what's happening? Every,
Yes, yes.
every time. Yeah.
Well, and also knowing that when you walk into the doctor that, yes, you've told them and yes, they have expectations, but to also understand that you are like, this is a beautiful being inside of you. And I want to let every woman who's pregnant or just thinking about having disordered eating or have that diagnosis that it's a struggle, but you are wonderful and beautiful. And I want you to know you have created something that is going to be an expectation of thrills for the rest of your life and a wonderful experience. So please try to embrace where you're at right now and know
Mm,
that you have a journey that is wonderful. And I hope that during this time and after you have someone to support you as a therapist and know there are so many more important people that can surround you, like a therapist that you can go see, and then also a registered dietitian and just know that you have so much education and there's books that I can recommend. Again,
mm,
there's again we can go into that later, but I'm
yeah.
getting distracted.
No, that's okay. And also, we'll put those in the show notes too, because Jenny's done
Yeah,
a great job compiling a lot of resources for you. And so we'll make sure that that's linked below, whether or not you're able to say them out loud, just so that they get all of it.
yeah,
Because we want them to have all the resources possible. I'm
yeah.
curious, I have heard people say that maybe had disordered eating before pregnancy, that for them, pregnancy was a relief because they felt like it was finally okay for their body to be the size it was, because it was okay to embrace, in their case, the curves and to say, this is
Mhm,
making life and pregnant women are beautiful, and that they felt sensual and they felt sexy. That postpartum was harder for them because
mhm,
that its job it's done, and now it's loose and there's extra everything, and that feeling. I've also heard other people say that pregnancy brought up a lot of body dysmorphia for them, that they felt like exaggerated sense of proportions and
mhm.
like some dissociation in their body. And I'm curious if you can talk to what you notice, like how does pregnancy generally affect people if I have maybe a history of disordered eating and I'm going into pregnancy or I'm in early pregnancy, like what are some of the normal reactions that I might have that I can expect to like keep an eye out for?
As a professional or just
No,
as an
as a
individual?
pregnant individual, yeah, who maybe has a history of disordered eating. Like, do you see that they more often let me change this question a little bit. Do you see that they more often go into pregnancy like, yay, I feel relieved, or that pregnancy is more of a hardship for them with disordered eating?
Ooh, I love that. Okay, I understand that. So this is one thing I did some research on it, and I will again in the show notes link the so you can resource everything I'm telling you. So actually, there in a Swedish study, they talked about how women are more and probably 60% more comfortable after and during even having an eating disorder. They are more comfortable and more content with their body. So, and that's a large scale,
Love that.
right?
Yeah.
It's a large scale
Yeah.
to
So
like.
more than half of them felt like their eating disorder improved with pregnancy.
Yes, and it was
Okay.
beautiful, and if anything, found their expectations as they got out into postpartum. When they
Mm-hmm.
got to that postpartum, the and it went down a little bit, went to 50%. Said, "You know what? I'm
That's still
still."
pretty incredible.
Right? They,
And
like.
it makes intuitive sense to me because I think that especially as women, like we are given this like idea that our body is this, product that
Mm,
like looks a certain way and performs a certain way and functions a certain way. And then when you get to experience it creating a whole human that you love with everything you
mhm,
have, it
mhm.
can change how you relate to your body.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
and that's why well, and the expectation of getting your body back, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's just throw that out the window. Let's just no,
It's
thank
not the same
you.
body anymore. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it is not, and that's basically what they were talking about in the study is that actually having a child and you think about during the study, they asked them, "When you think about having this child, what would you want this child to know about themselves and about their body?" And half of the
Mm,
women with eating disorders were like, "I want them to know to love their body." And that was
mhm.
beautiful, and it was a great question,
Yes.
and I think that's why it spoke to the healing and spoke to the process, and obviously, again, it's a beautiful but also that's another part of it is postpartum, getting your body into a place where you feel comfortable, and I want you to know, anyone, again, that when you're trying to get your body back, it is never it's just it's okay. Your body is what it is, and after you have a baby, it's gonna be different because it's made a beautiful being, and after that expectation, know
Mhm,
that what I need you to feed yourself. I need you to hydrate yourself. I need
mhm,
you because that baby needs you, right?
mhm.
If you're
And
breastfeeding.
because pregnancy and birth is like a really,
Yeah,
really demanding thing that your
yeah,
body went through. Like it needs
yes,
nourishment to become whole.
yes, and
Yeah.
that is and that expectation is during the pregnancy, the placenta and all of the expectation of pulling through your body, it needs all of that, and by giving it all that good nutrition, giving it all of that expectation of what you're like just saying, "Hey doc, what can I do more of?"
Mhm.
Is not a question of what you can do more of, is intuitively just listening to your body, right? Knowing
Mhm.
what you need because let's be honest, every pregnant woman knows what they need. They have some major cravings and they want
Right.
certain things. So,
Yeah, it's pretty clear if you listen. I don't well, or even if you don't listen, a pregnant body is like, this is what I want.
yes.
Yeah. I was curious because I looked it up and I don't know if you would feel like this is accurate to what you're seeing, but I saw like estimates of 9% of adults will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. Does that align with like what you have read and seen and feel, or what do you think is like how prevalent are eating disorders?
Oh, and I want to kind of speak to something. And when you're talking to how prevalent they are, it's kind of the expectation of in the 80s, we got our first diagnosis of anorexia nervosa, right? In the 80s. So if you can imagine that 9%, I actually think it's probably higher than that, right?
Mhm.
But the only reason why is because we finally realize when people are coming in and the mortality rate, I have to speak to this, right? There's
Mhm.
for mental disorders, for DSM diagnosed disorders, this is one of the highest mortality death rates.
Mm.
And it just scares me. It really does. I'll have to speak to that because I don't want people to know that it's not there, but I also want them to know there is a safe place to talk to people, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a safe place to go to, and eating disorders are prevalent. And that's especially from anorexia nervosa to bulimia to orthorexia. And orthorexia is more of a newer one that's come out
Mm-hmm.
and that one's more based around eating and how you're eating, and you're eating healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Finger quotes healthy. Mm-hmm.
yes, figure growth healthy things. So
Mm-hmm.
the identity around that is you are eating healthy, you are, but also I want to match that with, are you eating intuitively, right? Are you
Mm-hmm.
eating with an intuition of this is right for my body, not that
Right.
this is my expectation. So when you walk into a disordered eating, you have to say, hey, is this for the betterment of my body? And again, I have to understand, is this my health? Or is this
Mm-hmm.
what everybody else expects me to be healthy
Mm-hmm.
at? And I want you
Yeah.
to know that you can ask yourself that, because I know if you have to believe that in yourself you can trust. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's another big issue with a significant issue that comes up in anorexia nervosa is trusting our instincts and
Mm-hmm.
trusting and eating disorders. How do I trust myself? And I want you to know that eventually, with the help and with the care, you can learn to trust yourself again, because I think that comes up as a
Oh,
big
I love
issue.
that. I love
Right?
that. I love that. Yeah, because I think that with any type of recovery or healing process in
Yeah.
health, it's easy to get really stuck on like the goal, the ultimate goal being like, I am without this disorder, I am without this issue. What I love that you just said is like, it's not about being without, it's about being with. It's about learning to trust
Mhm,
yourself. It's about being in relationship with
mhm,
yourself. It's not
mm,
take away the eating disorder, back to what we were saying earlier, which the eating disorder served its purpose to protect you,
mm,
to take care of you in a way for a time. And also, it's time for you now to step into trusting yourself,
mhm,
right? So you're not
mhm,
losing, you're gaining.
mhm.
You're not going without something. No, I don't mean wait. I mean
Yeah.
you're not losing a part of yourself. You're actually gaining yourself through that
Mhm.
process. And like that's the cool thing to see, that people that come to the other end of it, that there's this like meeting themselves in a way.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
It's like a returning to yourself, to the self
Yeah.
that maybe needed to be there all along, that needed to be gathered,
Mhm.
in the
And
healing process.
it's a beautiful process, but it doesn't feel beautiful. But like I said, when you have the team and you have the people that can come alongside you in that multidisciplinary team, they are there, and you as if you can have a say in this, even
Yes.
going through it, right?
You should
It's
have a say. Yeah.
not like you're alone and everybody's telling you what to do. I want you to know you have a say in this. You have an
Mhm.
expectation. If you're like, nope, this therapist doesn't work, or nope, this registered dietitian doesn't work, or nope, I don't
Mhm.
like this psychologist or psychiatrist. You have an opinion, and that's okay. I don't want
Mhm.
you to feel like once you're in this diagnosable place that you can't speak your mind. You aren't trapped. You definitely have an opinion. You have an opening. This is the
Yeah.
ability to unguard yourself, as
That's
Christie
right.
keeps
Like
saying.
healing shouldn't be happening to you.
Yeah.
You should be the active director of what the healing is. You
Yes.
should feel like you're in the driver's seat of the healing. And I
Yes.
understand that in the early phases sometimes we're a little bit at odds with ourselves and we're a little bit kicking and screaming, but
Well
at
said.
some point you should feel like you're in the driver's seat, and that back to the like the healing process being coming home to yourself. Like you're not going to come home to yourself if everyone else is telling you how to do it. There has
Mhm.
to be a moment where your voice gets to be the loudest voice. And I think that that is part of the process of recovery for so many things, is
Yes.
like for a while, you're just sort of in the passenger seat, like just being guided through each step because you're really in a place where you don't even know what the next step needs to be. And you're just really taking the wisdom. And that's for a time
Mhm.
what you need to do.
Mhm.
And someday the healing needs to look like you saying, my turn, give me the keys.
Yeah.
I know what
Well
I
said.
need now. I'm hearing my inner voice now, and I'm hearing what my appetite is asking for now, and I'm going to
Mhm.
do it.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Well said.
So, before we close, like for those people who are listening to us right now that might be, you know, worried about their eating disorder, battling their eating disorder in that place of like self-protection that you talked about, or protection
Mhm.
of the disorder, and maybe even that place of shame or in that place of like overwhelmed. Like, you know, you've been there and you know what that feels like. Like, what do you hope they really take from what you're saying, if nothing else? What do you hope they hear from you today?
I am okay the way I am. It is a beautiful thing. And knowing that vulnerability in taking that step to open up is going to be a wonderful step. It's hard, but it's going to be wonderful. Please take that step and know that you can always, if a loved one is coming to you asking these questions, it's from love.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I am okay the way I am. It's a great mantra. I love that.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing your heart. And I know that you have done so much work to make sure that anybody listening has next steps that they can take, whether it's that quiz that you mentioned, or it's that organization that you mentioned, or it's other books or resources that you've offered. And so thank you for preparing that with such intention for them. And we will make sure to include that below so that people can take whatever the next step is for them while knowing that they are okay where they are.
Yeah, and thank you for your time. Thank you for coming to me and just trusting me with this information to be able to give it to the people that that want to listen and hear where to go and how to go. And you're an amazing
Oh,
Krysta, you're amazing.
oh, thank you. Right back at you. Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.